Okay, so thanks for joining us, everybody. And third time is maybe it's the charm, maybe not, depending on, on how things go. This might end up being the cursed program, but we'll see. I'm happy to have Diane Andrasik here to talk to us about photography using your iPhone. She is a professional photographer, and as she was saying before we hit record here, she teaches courses in photography at Chautauqua Institution. She takes people's portraits, she takes travel photos, all kinds of nature photos. She's got calendars and prints and all kinds of good stuff. So we are happy to have her here to share her knowledge with us. And I will turn it over to you. And people might be joining us, but we'll just let them in as they arrive, because I see Craig showing up now. Hi, Craig.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, well, again, thank you for having me, and let's hope the technical aspect of this eventually loads as it should, but we'll see how that goes. So I thought what might be very helpful for people, and which is one reason I have this album trying to load, so you can actually see some of the photos, although if I have a chance to open up my albums that are on the computer already, I'll try to do it that way, one or the other. So we'll see what happens. I thought what might be most handy is to start off with a little bit of a discussion about composition. I've taken an awful lot of workshops from very professional people, far more professional than I, including photographers who work for major magazines, National Geographic, and so forth. And whenever many of them start their workshops with us, they say the first three most important things about photography, and probably art in general, are number one, composition, number two, composition, and number three, composition. So in other words, you can have the most technically advanced camera on the planet. I have a Canon 5D, and the body itself is $3,000. And then I have a lens. One lens is $900, another lens is $1,200. Before I went to Iceland last year, I bought a very special wide-angle lens, very wide-angle lens, a rectilinear wide-angle lens, which means you don't get a lot of that bowing out of the edges, and it was $3,000. Now, I can have all those wonderful technical things, but if I don't know how to put the elements of the scene I'm looking at, the subject I'm looking at, in the right way, in the camera, in the viewfinder, and then snap the photo, it's all for nothing. So I was going to start with a description of where to place your subject inside the camera's viewfinder before you take the photo. I mostly work on a tripod. Not many people are going to do that, and you're surely not going to do that with your phone. So then it's just a matter of being steady enough and waiting to take the photo until you're really happy with what is inside your viewfinder. So the first thing I think about is whether I should place the subject, or the main subject, in the center or off to the side. So if it's in the center, if we imagine my fist being the center of this image, as opposed to it being over in another area off to the side of the viewfinder, that's going to give your image a different look, very often a different mood. So when you place something in the center, very often it creates symmetry, and therefore the image might be a little bit more subdued and reflective and calming, because the center position tends to do that kind of thing. Whereas if you place it on one of the sides of your viewfinder, it's going to create a more dynamic image. And when it's a little bit more dynamic, you get a sense of movement, of motion. Sometimes your eye maneuvers around the scene to look for other elements in the shot, if you've included them. And it gives you a different sense of perspective. So whether it's in the center or, again, off to the side, that makes an important thing. Now, if you have your camera, I should say your phone, and you have an iPhone, oh, I got a thing here. If you go to your settings for a moment, if you're with me, if you want to do this together. And you go to your camera, gotta find my here, in your phone. So settings, and it should just open up to your page. It gives you your name, like mine, Diane Andrasik, Apple ID, and so on. And just keep scrolling until you find the icon of your camera. And it takes a little bit to get down to it. And when you get to the camera, if you touch that camera, it'll open up to a new set of settings where it's going to say preserve settings, and it's going to say grid. I don't know if you can see this. This might get a little close here. Maybe not. See the grid?
Yes.
And there is a slider. So if you push the slider over, it's going to open up your grid. And I'm going to explain why I'd like you to know this grid. And then if now you see the green part of that slider, you can back out of that and go back to your main screen of your phone and find your actual camera icon on the main screen and open that. And what you should see is a grid. So you see the image of the screen that's being shown by your camera, by the camera's lens, but you should see a grid, two lines, both vertically and horizontally. Was everyone able to find that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't have an iPhone, so I'm just learning.
Okay, well, that's fine. That's good. You have a Samsung then, and Android?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Does
Alex,
does that work also with your camera on an iPad?
yes, it should. Right.
And yeah, I have a Samsung too, and it's very similar to what she was saying.
Yeah, I've got the instructions on one of the slides on this program that's now at 64%. Okay, now, if you do have the grid, you're going to see, if you point the lens of your camera, of your phone's camera at something, you have the ability now to place your subject either in the center or, let's say if I'm pointing it, let's say if I put my fist up here again, and I point my camera so that the fist is where the two top left lines are intersecting. And if I move my camera over, in my case, to the right, now I've got the fist right in the center of the two right-hand side intersecting lines. Placing the subject where the intersecting lines intersect is using something called the rule of thirds. It's a composition rule that is useful either in photography or also in art, any kind of art, painting, and so forth. And by using the rule of thirds, you're going to be able to, again, place your subject in a spot which creates a little bit more of a dynamic spot. So we can have the subject in the center, let's say a flower, a single flower, or a little vase of flowers. Or let's say we're visiting a lighthouse, so we put the lighthouse right in the center of the image, like where my hands are now. But then we can move around the lighthouse, maybe move a little further back, look around where there's some nice scenic area around the lighthouse, and we can place it up in the upper left corner, the bottom left corner, the top right, or the bottom right. So I have 4 locations in my viewfinder where I can place that object, the lighthouse, a house, a window, a flower, any number of subjects can be placed there instead of right in the center. So center the subject. It creates a mood of quiet, reflective, at ease kind of a situation, as opposed to place the subject according to the rule of thirds in one of those 4 areas where the lines of the rule of thirds grid intersects. and you have a more dynamic picture. You have an image, let's say I put the lighthouse here, or again, it's a flower. I have all this other space around it to now make use of for something or nothing. I might have nothing in that spot. It's just a matter of you're determining what other elements are in the scene that would look good along with that lighthouse. It could be the crashing seas. I could have the lighthouse here and the crashing seas all around it. I could have, again, a flower here, and over on the side, there might be a couple of other flowers off in the distance. So all those things mean that there will be opportunities for you to use your composition in a slightly different way. Now, when you're doing composition, you also might use something called, put something in the foreground, like again, my hand, and something in the background. And in using something in the foreground and something in the background, you might continue to use the rule of thirds. So here's my fist, there's some flower here. And in the background, there might be some other element. So the foreground and then the background work in tandem with each other. They kind of balance each other out. It allows you to really think of the scene that you're looking at, that you want to photograph. In order to not just, pick up your camera, click, take a quick snapshot. It makes you start thinking where you really want to place those elements in the scene, in the viewfinder, to make a more pleasing photograph. Okay, does that make some sense to you? I know we're kind of using this without the visual aids I was hoping to have. We're at 67%, so it's getting there. We might have it before the time is up. So composition is important. If you go to your computer later or tomorrow and you go to a search engine and put in rules of composition, you'll get 20, 30 of them. I'm just giving you like 3 here, 2 or 3. And they'll give you plenty of examples of those rules. Also Google rule of thirds, also sometimes called the golden mean, M-E-A-N. And you'll see all kinds of, you'll see the actual example of your rule of third grid. And then you'll see plenty of examples of how people, photographers use it, art people use it to make your, again, your scene a little bit more interesting, to have, again, either a more reflective, symmetrical look, or again, a more dynamic look, how to add and take away other elements in the photograph so that, again, you're improving your photograph. It's not just a snapshot, it goes beyond that. Now, I thought a couple of other things we might take a look at, and if you have your camera, or I should say have your phone and have it open, and have your camera on, so you're pressing the camera icon, and even if you have an Android, you can make use of some of these, because some of this is relatively similar. We might look a little bit at some of the tools that your iPhone has, or again, the Android. Many of you have in the icons on the top of your screen a flash, the words, the letters HDR, something that looks like a bullseye, which is your so-called live, L-I-V-E view, a timer, self-timer, and if it's especially the iPhone, what looks like 3 circles. One is very light, one is a little darker, and the last one is pretty much a solid white. Now, those are some of your basic tools. The flash, some of you may put on once in a while. You just, tap that icon of the flash. Looks like a kind of a lightning bolt. We should just keep in mind that the flash in these little these phone cameras, the flash might perhaps extend to maybe 4 feet, maybe 5 feet. So if you don't have some person relatively close to you, the flash is basically sort of useless. It's not meant to flash like a group of 10 people standing on a porch or inside your house. It's really very limited. And again, you can kind of see when the flash goes off, it's barely a blink. I'm sure someplace along the line they'll improve them. You actually can purchase some objects that might be added to your camera, to the phone's camera, to extend the flash, but they're a little bulky and not so very useful. So use the flash according to the rule of thumb of it's not going to flash something far away. Sometimes if you're watching a football game and they've taken all the lights off and suddenly you see all the flashes going off from people's phones, pretty much they're taking a picture of nothing except the darkness. So that's okay because it looks pretty for those of us watching on TV. It's just, people flashing a light. HDR, and probably on the top of your screen, your camera screen, there's a line through the HDR, meaning your HDR is not on, it's off, okay? HDR means high dynamic range. Now, if Alex will put himself on for a moment, switch the screen to himself, and turn your screen so that we see that window.
So folks who are watching with the grid view will see me already. You might be watching with speaker view. So can folks out there see me?
Yes.
Yes, they can see me. Okay.
Good, good.
So I'm turning towards here. So I'm getting a little bit darker. Is that what you?
Yeah, keep it going. There we go. Now, if you have a scene and there's something bright in the background behind the person or persons or scene you're trying to photograph, the camera is sort of struggling to decide what exposure to give you. Because you have a bright subject or part of your subject, in this case, the light coming through the window, and then you have this wall, and there's a bookcase we can kind of see. And Alex, if you kind of turn it so that, there we go. Very often, now Alex is close to the screen, to the computer screen. So the camera is doing a decent job of correctly exposing his face. But if you switch back to me so that they can see me.
Yeah, they should be able to see you.
Okay, see, I'm deliberately sitting a little bit back. And you can see my window behind me is causing me to be looking, my face looks darkened. The screen, the window behind me is fairly bright. The bed is lit fairly well. I'm in my spare room, which I use as a bedroom for guests and as my computer room for me. So the problem here is that we have a high dynamic range, meaning the bright window is very, very, very bright. Myself, I'm backlit. The light is coming behind and hitting the back of my head, and there's no light coming and hitting me. The only thing in front of me is my computer screen. So I'm in a poorly lit area. So it's a high dynamic range. It's a range of exposure that's very high, very contrasting. So if you are taking a picture like this, it's very possible that my face will be dark, backlit, maybe even like if you take a photograph in certain situations, backlit subjects become so dark that there's no light on the person. So basically the face or the people turn almost black. All right, so the backlighting kind of situation is a high dynamic range, a very contrasting light situation. So high dynamic range on your either the iPhone, and there's also the possibility of turning it on in your Androids. High dynamic range, if you turn that on, is your camera's attempt to take an example of light from that very bright window behind me and my face and sort of even it out, kind of create less contrast. Now, the high dynamic range function on the phone, iPhone or Android, really doesn't work so well. It's limiting in what it can do, Okay, there's another fix for that we're going to get to when we get to how to expose a little bit more properly. But also, if we decide that we want to do some work more on different kinds of apps for your phone and its camera, there's an app you can download that specifically attempts to fix the very contrasty light that we have in a scene like I'm in right now. So it's a HDR app. It's called HDR Pro. It takes a little bit of practice to get the use of it, but it's not too bad. It's not too difficult an app. And it can save your scenes and do some wonderful things. It can create a little bit more of a painterly look to your image. So it looks a little less real and a little more painterly, and that can be very pleasing. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the contrasting light is just so extreme that you really can't use it very much. But we're going to try to do something that may resolve the issue of this HDR kind of an image. Some of you may be aware that if you take your phone, so again, my camera screen is on, and I'm literally able to see, in my case, my computer, or I could turn around and with my camera, you can kind of see it right there. See how bright my camera screen is, my phone screen is, because I'm literally pointing it at that very bright window. If I take my finger and press the area where the window is, you can see at some point, now it's sometimes hard to see, the screen reacts. It's trying to darken because it realizes that such a very bright light out there that it's almost impossible to really get a good photograph because it's a photograph of a very white, bright area. But if I touch that screen and pull my finger down, you can kind of see how now that area of the window is actually dark. So this is how you change your exposure using your phone.
I got a slider going sideways on my Android phone.
Say that one more time. You have a
Slider that when you push
yes,
that.
yes, and for your iPhone, a slider also appears when you poke it, and then again, it looks with the iPhone. It actually looks like there's a sun and then a yellow slider. And if you slide that up and down, you can just look at my phone, even as far away as I am, and you see how it's very bright, very dark. You're controlling exposure that way. So if the point was you're taking a picture and for some reason you want that window to look kind of normal, let's pretend it's a scene that's more interesting than just a window, you can control exposure by tapping the screen. Again, either the yellow box on the iPhone where a slider appears and there's a sun in it. You can kind of see the sun, slide it up and down. And then in the Android, again, the slider is going to appear also. And then you slide it up and down or sideways, depending on how you're pointing. And then you're somewhat controlling exposure. So again, HDR can be something you're just not even aware of. And you're not even aware that when you point at some scenes, our eye can take a scene that's very bright and very dark and see everything well. Your camera, whether it's a camera like my $3,000 camera or whether it's the camera inside your phone, can't always take a photograph when there's such a hugely contrasting scene. But you can control it. You can decide, I want either my face brightened. So if right now you were pointing your camera at me, you would press it where my face is, press the screen where my face is, and slide it up to brighten my face. The background is going to get even more bright. We don't care. Let it go bright. It's not important. But my face is important, so you want to brighten it. Or again, let's say Godzilla was peeking in my window right now, and by God, you're going to get a photograph of Godzilla because you're going to sell that image for a much bucks to some newspaper or whatever. Well, then forget me. Let my face go completely black. Press where that window is and darken it until little old Mr. Godzilla is clearly visible through my window. And in the meantime, I'll be running like hell because I'm not waiting for you to fix your photo. Making a little sense there?
Yeah, very good.
So that's just a little lesson in what that is doing. That's one of your, again, the HDR is making you aware that there is something called high dynamic range. There are photographs you're trying to take that have extreme brights and extreme darks, and you want to sometimes fix it. Decide which you really want a good photograph of, okay? Now, again, I'm back to the screen that shows the camera's main screen, and there was the flash at the top, HDR, and then the thing that the icon that looks like a bullseye. And the icon that looks like a bullseye is live. Does the Android have that too, Alex? Is it live view?
I don't think so. I think that's an Apple thing.
It's an Apple thing. And what that is actually, if you take a picture, let's say you have a baby in front of you and take a picture with the live view on, it actually creates a teeny tiny video. And then when you play the picture back, it appears for a minute like a hand moves. Instead of it being just a photograph, a still, it actually appears to be an actual little video. I don't care to use it very much. I tend to never use it, but some people find it a little amusing. The next thing over, you have a little video. Okay, we're 88% complete. So we might make it, and I'll zoom through my pictures very quickly because I don't want to keep you too long. We're at about a half an hour now. A self-timer is just like in any camera. A lot of your old-fashioned cameras have them. Some of you had point-and-shoot cameras, and your point-and-shoot camera had a self-timer. If you press that icon, you're going to get a choice of having your camera delay taking a picture for 3 seconds or 10 seconds. I presume Android will be very similar. It might be 5 and 10, 3 and 5 and 10, kind of depends. Now, why would you use this? Well, if you had a tripod, or you could set your camera up in some way so that it's going to be still on a shelf with something propped against it, and then you want to be in a photograph with other people, aside from taking the old-fashioned selfie, well, you set that your phone up, press that 10-second delay, run around to where your rest of your people are, and in 10 seconds, the camera will count down and take the photograph, and you'll actually see the numbers counting down on the screen. And 10 seconds gives you enough time to stand where you want to stand, aside from, how difficult it is to do a selfie, and it's like, arr, and you all appear all kind of weird, all your faces smooshed together. So some people prefer to use the self-timer to take the photograph. And finally, at the end of the iPhone, you have those 3 circles. And if you tap that icon, give me a second here. I'm just able to see my lovely screen pop up here. My albums. And let's see if the right thing came up here. Give me a minute for me to. Yay, we're saved. If you tap that little icon, you're going to see at the bottom that you can take a photograph with different tones. It might look more blue, might look more brown, and you can actually take the photograph as a black and white. Now, some people like that because they like black and white photos. I prefer to take the photo in the normal way. And then again, if we meet again, I'll show you how much iPhone and Samsung's Android offers in its editing section. And when you edit a photo you took as a plain old color photograph, you may turn it into black and white then. And then you have your original color photo, and then you have your black and white photo. And you don't have to worry about losing the color photo. Now, I am going to share my screen. Yay!
Yay.
Let's see if I can do that. I press share screen, right?
Yep.
Yeah, a comment about editing photos. When I went to an Apple session at the Apple store one time,
Right,
what it said was if you edit it in your original photo folder,
right.
you edit it
Yes.
for good. You can't go back and get your original. But if you put it in an album and edit it, your original one stays okay.
There you go. Perfect. Or you can duplicate.
Right.
And so again, if we meet
And
for a
then work
future
on
session,
a
yes,
double.
yes, work on the double. We're going to learn about making albums, deleting albums, adding things to albums. So again, depends on how much you guys want to learn. If you want me to get back and do that kind of thing. So now, do you see my screen?
Yep.
Alex, you
Yes.
see me?
Yep.
Okay. So here's what I was going to show you, that
Yay.
we are able to deal with the composition. We looked at some basic controls. I already kind of dealt with a bit of the focus and exposure, so I kind of jumped ahead there. But here's an example, just to show you that Alex wasn't lying to you, that I do sell my work professionally. I create the calendar for the place called Chautauqua Institution. And so here right away, you see I'm using what's called the rule of thirds. This is the Miller Bell Tower, and it's in the rule of thirds. It's not in the center of the screen. It's over off to the side. And I do this because I have all this space around it now to place other elements. In this case, no elements except for the water, because here I can place the title of this calendar. It's the Chicago Institution 6-month calendar for 2020-21. And this is the back of the calendar. That's some later time because we're a little bit, we're into 35 minutes now. I can go back to this and show you how in every single image, I'm using a composition rule, and that enhances the photograph in some way. So here's what I was saying about composition. We're talking about subject placement and centering the subject, which commands attention and creates symmetry. And we get a more calm and reflective mood that, again, is very, very pleasing if you have the right subject matter. Or we can put the subject in an off-center position, especially this rule of thirds. It makes your image more dynamic. It gives us a better use of perspective, and we can place other dynamic elements in the image. So here is a centered subject. We have this pot along this railing, and in this sequence of very nice archways. Now it's very careful to have 1, 2, 3 archways, so it's symmetrical. And I have a part of an archway here and a part of an archway there in a very limited way, and cut off in as close a way similar to each other as possible. Again, it's calming, it's quiet, it's reflective, because it's symmetrical, because it's centered. Same thing here. This is, Alex knows this place. It's one of my favorite places in New York City, Bethesda Terrace. And so I have this, again, this series of archways, and I centered myself so that I could see the this wonderful Bethesda fountain off in the background. I deliberately included more of the scene because this is such a wonderful tiled ceiling. This is one of the things it's most famous for. Now, I could allow myself to crop this image in such a way that I don't see as much of the sides here. I've got all of the arches on the left side and on the right side. I could crop it so that I don't see as much of that. It's just a matter of choice, of taste. Churches and buildings that have sort of a symmetrical style built in, and churches often do, classic buildings often do. make for good symmetrical centered subjects. And so what's on the left is on the right. You see it again here. These two churches are in Iceland. And then you see it here in this lighthouse. I had to print out the name of the lighthouse because I have no clue how to pronounce that. Again, it's also in Iceland. You can see the lovely iceberg, or I'm sorry, the lovely, come on, what's the word?
Glacier.
Here? Glacier. Glacier, thank you, way off in the background. That's not snow on a mountain, those are glaciers. But again, what's on the left is on the right in this image. And so when I center it, it's symmetrical, it's more calming, more peaceful. It's just the nature of the beast. Here's Bester Plaza at Chautauqua, placing this right in the center. So what I see here is what I see on the right side. Here's doorways, windows, all create this same symmetrical look if you find the right doorway, the right window, the right building. So when you are going out and about in the next couple of weeks, take your phone with you and put that camera on and look deliberately for things, subjects that you can center and see if you can capture some of those. And again, I told Alex that down the road, should you care to share some of these images, we could show how you're using a certain kind of composition tool and show how it's working, what might change, are you not centered enough, could you step back more, step forward more. Even a boat on water can be symmetrical and centered, flower. All these make use of the same composition tool. Here's that rule of thirds grid, which now many of you have on. And of course, if you take a picture using the rule of thirds grid, the grid will not appear in your photo. It's simply a tool to help you see, to place your subject, either again in the top left intersecting line, the bottom left, top right, or bottom right, okay? And again, here were some of these icons we were talking about a minute ago. And here is again how you set up your composition grid, rule of thirds grid. And if you have the Android, you usually again tap on the settings icon, select and tap your grid line switch. You may have to search for it, go up and down until you find it. And of course, just like with the iPhone, Samsung changes things in newer versions. So hopefully it will be as simple as doing what you see here. Here again, I have centered the back of this building. This is in Bonaire. This is what's called a slave. Literally, when slaves were brought to this island to work in the salt mines, this is where they lived, in the middle of nowhere on this beach, hot as heck. Bonaire's a very hot island. So I centered it with the clouds behind it. And this is using another app that if you guys want to learn it, I could show you the basics of it, or a lot of it. It's called Snapseed. It's the best app for photography. It's always voted best app for photographing on your phone's camera. And it takes a little getting used to how to use it. I don't use all of the tools on it, but it did this. The clouds were not quite as prominent and dramatic until I used this app. So again, I point out that as something you might want to use. Here I've placed go ahead.
What's the name of that again?
Snapseed, S-N-A-P-S-E-E-D. Strange name for a photographic app. And you can find it in the application, in the App Store on either of the kinds of phones. It's good for both phones, iPhone and Samsung. So now I've put this row of these slave huts in the bottom left rule of third. So now we have this entire scene, the dramatic sky again, this very barren beach, and it gives us a sense of the loneliness of where these slaves would live. Here's a scene in Zion National Park. I have put this prominent mountaintop in the rule of thirds grid in the upper left corner. Here again is this is the Miller Bell Tower at Chautauqua. And basically I'm placing the top of this tower. It's a bell tower, so the clock tower and again the bells up in the upper rule of thirds. This was my class photographing. We're standing not on the water, but on a nice dock in the right position. Here is a moose, mama moose, and her baby. I'm not using my iPhone for this. I'm using a telephoto lens with my good camera. But here is the moose and its baby in the rule of thirds. It allows us to see its environment and to see where it's heading, that it's moving along the shore, baby's following on the shoreline as it's feeding. Again, using my camera phone in Iceland, we got the sheep on the run, and then I cropped it. I was more wide angle because that's what most of your phones are, of course, and it's not easy to use your phone in your camera, I'm sorry, your camera in your phone as a telephoto because it's not a great telephoto, so I cropped. And here I have the 3 sheep running away in the rule of thirds. This unusual church covered by moss in the rule of thirds. This lighthouse in Iceland, orange colored, in the rule of thirds. This little girl with her little teddy bear in the rule of thirds in this field.
And just so you know, oh, sorry, just so you know, there's a little bit of a lag as you're going through. So just kind of from the sheep to the moss to the flower, but that's okay. Just wanted to let you know.
Okay, good to know. All right, so there's the sheep. And by the way, as a rule of thumb, try to get any living thing that's looking in a certain direction or moving in a certain direction to have more space in the direction to which it's running or looking. Otherwise, if you cut it off and the creature is right here, it appears as though they're going to bump right into the edge of the screen. So give it space. So again, here's this church in Iceland covered in moss and grass. Here is this little stubby lighthouse, also in lighthouse in Iceland. Again, rule of thirds. This little girl with her teddy bear, flower. Here I've centered this lighthouse, and here I'm using that app called Snapseed, and look how it looks very painterly. It does not look real. That's the real lighthouse. See the difference? So Snapseed has the ability, using a certain tool, to create a more painterly look. Unrealistic, but pleasant. Here, I've placed it in the rule of third. Centered, rule of thirds. Another one in the rule of thirds, using the grass as a fill inside the camera's viewfinder so that you have the lighthouse's scenic surroundings, its environment, okay? Again, a single centered house, actually a little utility building. And then here's that same building in the rule of thirds with, again, a visual element of the grass in front of it. Again, I mentioned that we can use foreground and background to create this balance between the subject and another element. And so here is the subject of the post office on the grounds of Chautauqua, but I've chosen to use this group of tulips in the foreground. Look how much more colorful it is. The flowers kind of fill what would be bland grass, plain, simple green grass. Now there's a colorful bunch of flowers, a pop of color in front of it. Here I'm at Monument Valley, and this is one of those mittens down in the valley. So I moved around until I found this rock. This huge rock is now the foreground, and the mitten of Monument Valley is in the background. Here I've got a fountain in Fredonia. This is where Alex comes from. Barker Common has 2 of these wonderful fountains, and I've used the 3 cherubs of the fountain for my foreground. And this is the River House in the back. And here I'm back at the Miller Bell Tower. I've got all of these boats on the shoreline of this Chautauqua Lake in the foreground. I've got enough room to place my name, Chautauqua. I also sell cards, photo note cards at the bookstore on these grounds. And so I always leave a little space so I can put the word Chautauqua in and then photography by. And so again, foreground and the background. And then, sorry, I would not go forward. Here we were walking, this is at Nantucket. We were walking along and found some boats, again, a couple of kayaks and boards overturned in the grass. And there's the background of the houses of the people who undoubtedly own these things. Here's a fence up close, a very weathered, sort of gritty kind of a fence. And there's that same lighthouse peeking out over the top of the grass in the background. Rule of thirds, foreground, background. I go kayaking. So I saw all of these kayakers in front of me. Oops, I'm sorry. Oops, there we go. So I moved around in my kayak so that these kayakers were in front of me. There's the guide giving a tour. We're on a tour here of the Buffalo River. This is one of the silos on the Buffalo River. And I actually did a panoramic shot. That's why the silo looks bowed as it does. It looks a little weird in its shape. So foreground, background. And this is where I was showing you how you have the rule of thirds grid. So now hopefully all of you are familiar with that. And we'll look at some of these other options, maybe at some future time. And this is where we touched our screen, the yellow box appeared with that slider, and you can control how lighter or darker you create your scene to appear before you take the photo. And again, hold your camera, your phone camera as securely as you can. Now, these are some things we might discuss at some future time, more composition, more editing tools, albums and galleries, apps for your phone. So talk to Alex and say, well, yeah, I would like to do more of this. Or I don't have a clue about where I even find my editing tools. Let's talk about that. I know I have albums on my phone and I created some, but there are some here that I've never created. What do I do with that? I want to rename an album, or I want to delete an album or add photos to an album. Now we could do a half hour just on albums. There's so much to learn about those. So anybody have any questions? I'm sorry we had that technical glitch, but it worked out in the end, I hope.
Yep, it worked out.
Great.
Yeah, and I think that albums discussion is one that folks, if I'm not mistaken, will be interested in, because that's a question that's come up a number of times.
Hey,
So
great.
any effort to understand that better will be helpful. So maybe plan that. But any other questions or comments?
Okay, good to know.
I'll just say that was really super.
Oh, great.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that had come up in one of the other things that I attended had to do with where you store your photos and
Yeah.
how you can find them on
Right.
an Apple product as
Okay.
opposed to putting them in folders like you can with Microsoft.
Yes, yes, and I
That
can
would
give you
definitely helpful.
there's a lot of good information about that I can help you with. Good question. So I'll add that to my list. Storage. And when I teach classes at Chautauqua, if you don't know much about Chautauqua, talk to Alex about it. That's another whole discussion. It's a great place to visit. But when I teach classes there, almost every single class, that same question comes up. I've got 10,000 photos on my phone or 10,000 on my laptop or 6,000 on my computer. And so there are different ways of storing them, and I can discuss that if that's a good question.
Right.
Yeah, that's been a perennial sort of bugaboo with us. So all the information with that helps.
Remind me how to unshare my screen so we can go back to normal.
Same place where you shared it. There's click on share screen. It should say stop sharing. Oh,
It's not coming up.
I can do it.
Oh, good. You do it.
I think I can anyway. Let's see.
because I placed, there we go. Good.
Yeah, I shared a whiteboard and now I'll unshare the whiteboard.
Great. Wonderful. Good. Okay. Now we're back.
That sort of brings up another question, Alex, that you can address another time is I was trying to share a photo album with someone on a Zoom meeting from my iPad, and I could not figure out how to do that. So
That's layers of complication.
yeah,
Yes,
sometime if we could figure out how to share a screen from an iPad. I can do it from my computer, but I couldn't from the iPad.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because I want to explore how to share a screen. I can do it when I'm teaching class because I have a special connection to connect with I have a digital projector, but I'd like to know how to do that here because then it would be so much easier for me to show you on my phone as I do in class.
Yep.
You know, I'm pointing here, pointing there, press here, press there, go into your settings, especially if we're doing one of those apps. It's very hard to do it unless you're seeing the things in front of you as I show them. Very good.
Look into. All right.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for now? But with the idea, we can certainly have more of these in the future. So if you don't have anything right now, we'll come back for more.
I had an unrelated issue, Alex. So
Okay.
I'll let you finish where you're at.
Okay, I do have another thing that I have to start at 5, so maybe we could chat by email or we can chat another.
The issue that came up was we got a notice at the VA about the new iOS update to 14, and it said hold off on it. There were some concerns about using it in the VA environment, so I'm waiting to hear from them. They said wait till you hear from your IT people about whether to go ahead and upgrade to 14. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so they might be uncertain about the security.
Yeah, they don't usually do that, but this time they made a point of sending an email out to everybody. So
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, let us know how that goes.
okay, we'll do.
Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you for being here with us, Diane, and we will.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely have you
Thank
back.
you.
Learned a lot. Thanks a lot.
Good, good.
Yes,
All right, great.
Have a
Good to
great
see
day,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Thank you all.